Hey everyone, my name is Austin, and I'm so glad that you decided to watch our River Valley Rogue River sermon. We are a church located in the beautiful city of Rogue River, and we would love to connect with any and all of you. One of the best ways you can do that is by joining our Facebook page. You can type in River Valley Rogue River, and you can join our page. Another way to do that is by sending direct emails. If you want to be in contact, if you need any prayer, make sure to reach out. We would love to get in contact with you. We hope that this sermon blesses you. Have a great rest of your day.
If you've been with us, we are in our church's core values series. So we're taking 9 weeks to look through just the core values that make up why we do what we do. And our last 3 weeks were about this idea of connect, right? Connecting to God, to Jesus, connecting with others. This week is kicking off our Grow series, right? Growing with others, growing with God. And then we will end with our the section about go, right? Go out and make disciples, which really we want to embody that you are sent mentality that we've talked about here at Rogue River. So as I had said, we are beginning the grow part of this series. And what we're looking at in our fourth value today is what I feel is the very if you're going to try to grow in your relationship with God as a Christian, you need to understand this value. And it's this value that we can't, God can. All right, we can't do anything, God can do everything. The big idea for this value, it says this, it says, we believe the Christian life is only possible by trusting the power of the Holy Spirit. I think our problem with this as Christians can sometimes be our problem to understand this is kind of how, that we live in the extremes of how we view our abilities as people. And what I mean by that is last week, the real Austin talked about maybe that friend that comes into church, and it's the friend that just has a very negative view on themselves to the sense where they are not good enough to be in church, right? You've invited me to church. I don't want to go because if I walk in, the windows are going to shatter, the walls are going to catch on fire, the ground is going to open up, and Satan himself is going to swoop me and whoever is by me up and going to take us straight to hell. Right now, that's an extreme, but that's how some of us, we are too far gone, I believe is the term he used. And so that's one extreme. But another one on the exact opposite is that mentality of I can and I will, right? And I don't need anybody else to help me. They have this, maybe they've heard Philippians 4:13, I can do all things, and they just actually stop there. They don't go to the through Christ who strengthens me. They actually just stop at the I can do all things, and they're like, well, that's got a ring to it. I like that. Right, so we hang out in these extremes. And a lot of us, I think, could see that latter personality as being the pompous, arrogant, prideful one. But I'm here to argue that both are equally dangerous and a representation of pride. More importantly, just a very wrong view of themselves. So if we're going to grow in our relationship with God and then our relationship with others, we need to understand that we can't do it ourselves, that God can. We need to get to that I can't part of our lives. Otherwise, if I think that I can, I'm just going to stay limited to operating in my own power. And quite frankly, that is very small compared to God's power. I imagine, let's say you live in a house, okay, a pretty good-sized house, but you're only led to believe that there's one light that works in that house. So that's all you ever use. Let's say it's your kitchen light. So you are operating throughout your whole house just by the power of your kitchen light. It's great in the kitchen, get a lot done in the kitchen, but if you go to that third or fourth bedroom, it's completely dark. But see, operating in God's power is realizing there's a dozen more lights in the house, and you can turn all the lights on, and now all of a sudden what you can do is beyond imagination. Your electricity bill is going to go up, but you can operate in more power. So it's understanding that we can't in our own power, but God can. I'm reminded of John 5, verse 15, where Jesus is talking about our relation to him. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. That's really encouraging. Then he goes, for apart from me, you can do nothing. He doesn't say, hey, apart from me, you got a C- average, right? You're 5 or 6 out of 10, you'll do okay. No, he actually says, apart from me, you'll do nothing. So you might ask us, hey, where did you get this we can't, God can? Jesus himself, right? Apart from me, you can do nothing. So I'm excited today because we're going to take a little time to look in the Old Testament. We're going to look at some stories where we really see we as humans can't, but God can. And then we're going to look at what living out God can looks like in our life. And we're actually going to get some help from a very powerful video testimony from a River Valley family. But before we get there, one of these things that just kind of, when you're sitting there and things go through your head and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Have you ever thought about what Old Testament stories would be like if God was not involved? Now, some of you Bible purists are like, Tim, real quick, before you start blaspheming, the Bible, without God, would not actually be here, right? The Bible is God-inspired, God-breathed scripture, so we agree, that would not be here, right? But take a turn into kind of creative town, and what would these stories of these Bible characters look like without God's intervention? Right? Because a lot of these people, a lot of the heroes, a lot of the Hebrews 11 Hall of Fame heroes are either ordinary or actually below ordinary people. But when they get matched with an extraordinary God, they do these really cool things. So we're going to look at 3 stories, and they're going to help us understand the we can't part of life, right? Understand we can't. So we're going to start our first point. I believe it's your first blank if you're taking notes. It says, we have to remember, if we're going to understand we can't, that it's God's glory and not ours. God's glory, not ours. And we're going to get help from our guy Moses in Exodus 14. So if you're unfamiliar with Moses, right, a stuttering man who by biblical account was not really the prototype for a leader, right? He was not a good leader. So what does God have him do? Oh, no big deal. Just leading the Israelites out of slavery from Egypt. Yeah, tall order, right? So Moses kind of has this back and forth with Pharaoh. He's like, let my people go. No. Let my people go. No. So God just slams Egypt with all these plagues where the Pharaoh was eventually like, take him. You're ruining my life, right? Just get out of here. And so Moses takes these Israelites, and they are now fleeing Egypt. Well, classic Pharaoh says, bad idea. Shouldn't have done that. Now none of our work is getting done. So he takes his army and he starts chasing after these Israelites. And so the Israelites are rolling, and they probably got that high. They're like, oh, this is so cool, we're free. And they look back and they see a bunch of chariots, right? Horses, things with wheels moving a lot faster than them. And they're like, uh-oh. And what's the big problem? They look in front of them and there's the sea. Right? Just a big body of water. So this is like before rock and a hard spot was a thing. Now it's before a body of water and people that want to kill them. So they are in a tough situation. And then Moses turns to the Israelites and he gives this advice, and he says in verse 13, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. You got to know there was an Israelite in there that was like, great advice, bro. Like, are you providing the popcorn for when the Egyptians just completely destroy us? Because I want to watch, right? So they're like, that doesn't make sense. In the human realm, that doesn't compute, Moses. I don't know what you're talking about. But he says that to them. Well, as the story plays out, we see that God actually opens up the sea in front of them, and the Israelites go through, and then they get to the other side. But here's the deal. It's not like God is opening up the Rogue River. This isn't 40 yards of water. There's some accounts that think that this was several miles of water, to the point where you're walking in and you actually can't maybe see where you came from or where you're going. This is a huge body of water that the Lord has split open and created this highway for them. So they go through on the other side. Egyptians try to go through. The walls come down, destroy the Egyptians. It says every member of the army was destroyed. But here's the deal, and here's what I want us to understand. So Moses trusted God's plan. Now, I don't know if he completely understood all of God's plan, but what he understood was the Lord's desire. And that was God would be glorified. God's not trying to make Moses the champ here, right? He's not trying to glorify Moses, but he actually says several times throughout this chapter in verses 4 and 17, he says, I'm doing this so that I will be glorified. Can I get an amen? Yeah, so that I will be glorified. He said, it is through this that my glory will be displayed. And he's not only doing this to the Egyptians, he's doing it like for the Israelites. Because remember, he's getting ready to take the Israelites on a journey. And he's like, I am showing you, I am the creator, I am the potter, I am the musician, as Austin had said last week. Like, I am in control and I got this. He's telling the Israelites, like, sit back, relax, and you get to see what I do best. And that is deliver you, that is rescue you, that is protect you. But you see, what if Moses didn't really have that God can, we can approach? What if Moses had this we can and we got this approach? I don't think it's going to work out very well. I think if Moses is sitting there and he's at the sea, he is going to look like the dude who is trying to get into his house with the wrong key and the lock, right? You're fiddling with it, like the key doesn't fit, but you're just trying really hard, and it's just not working. And the Israelites, that sarcastic one's going to be like, hey, bro, I have an observation. It's not working, and we're closer to dying now, right? Or if I was Moses, and again, trying to take this in my own hands, you know what I think I'm doing? I actually think I'm doing this, all right, half of you go that way, half of you go that way, and we're going to see which one they chase, right? Also, a bad approach. But I think we do this in our lives. We say, God, I get it. You're the musician. You're the potter. Your song doesn't make sense. I think I can do better pottery. I think I can just do better. So why don't you sit back, God, and see what I can do? And we have this mentality. But we got to understand that we're not doing this for our glory. I'm not doing anything so that I can elevate Tim to a high level. And what is really cool, understanding that it's God's glory, it actually makes me feel a lot better when I realize I am not trying to make myself look very impressive. And here's why, because I am not very impressive. And I'm not saying this oh, I feel bad for Tim. I want to let him know. No, I know I'm not impressive, and I am okay with it because it is God who is the impressive, amazing one. It is for his glory that we are doing this. It's not for my glory. Because if I try to build myself up like clockwork, what happens? I fall back down, right? But it's for God's glory. And as a church, we fully recognize that if we're not walking in step with God, if we're not pointing to God and what he's doing, that's when we fail. When we think that kind of we can, and it is for us. So that is the first point. It's God's glory, not ours. Second way to understanding that we can't and God can is that we have to understand it is God's power, not ours. And we're actually going to go to 1 Kings, and it's my favorite Bible story of all time, right? I used to think it was just my favorite Old Testament story, but it's actually the whole Bible, and that is the story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal. So if you're unfamiliar with this story, basically Elijah was a prophet of the Lord in a time where it was not good to be a prophet of the Lord, right? So there's an open season, right? If you are following or you worship Big G God, we want you dead, right? So the Lord tells him, hey, we want you to go to this king. This king Ahab was associated with the people that wanted the prophets of the Lord dead. Classic. It says, go to him. So he goes to this king and says, King Ahab, you and your family worship the wrong God, lowercase g. So this leads to a showdown on this place called Mount Carmel. And so you got Elijah, singular, by himself, and 450 prophets of this false god Baal. That'd be really intimidating, right? 1 verse 450. And the bet is this. It's not really a bet, but this is what I'm saying, is that they're both going to build these altars. And whoever can get their God to light this altar on fire without the actual use of fire wins. Okay? And so as a gentleman, Elijah lets the prophets of Baal go first. And they have no luck, right? They're trying, they're chanting, they're dancing. It's getting kind of weird, right? And Elijah's kind of looking at his clock. He actually says some really pretty funny things, but I'll let you go look at that. And so he says this, but now we get to Elijah, who goes one step further, and what I would call kind of a flex, just trying to show off a little bit. He says, all right, you got those jugs, fill them with water, pour them on the altar. Okay, cool, do it again, right? So he fills this altar that is just covered in water. And then he turns to God in prayer, and this is just a powerful part. And if you've been here at River Valley, you've probably seen Austin get pretty excited, right? That like banging his fist on the table, just pumped. And I love that passion about Austin, and that's how I imagine Elijah when he is praying to God. And he says this in chapter 18, he says, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are the God of Israel and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all of this at your command." He says, "Oh Lord, answer me." That's where I think the fist pounding happens. He says, "Answer me. Answer me so these people will know that you, oh Lord, God, that you have brought them back to yourself." So he is pumped. He is jacked up, and he is just ready to go. And what I love about Elijah is he's in this moment. All the spotlight is on Elijah, and something really cool is about to happen. And his claim to fame, his plea to God isn't that, hey, that they'll see that I'm really cool, or that they'll see that I can do this. His claim, his plea to God is that they need to know that you are God, and I am your servant. He doesn't even say that I'm your number two, or I'm your homeboy, or I'm your friend. I am your servant. That's what these people need to realize. So, was Elisha a little arrogant? Sure. Cocky? Borderline, right? But no doubt he understood what a lot of us fail to understand. And it's that you, God, are the God of Israel, and I am your servant. You are God, and I am your servant. Now, I hope, or I don't think, there's actually anybody sitting in this room that has this full-on God complex where they actually think they're the creator of the heaven and the earth, right? And if that is you, Pastor Austin would love just to have a conversation with you in the back, right? But I don't know if any of us have that level of, like, arrogance. But I think a lot of us struggle with this idea that we maybe think or tell ourselves that we're actually like coworkers or counterparts with God. That our conversations are like, I'm going to spitball with God, he's going to spitball with me, like we're going to run some ideas back of each other, I'm going to tell him something new, I'm going to teach him something, we're just going to go back and forth, right? Like I think we think sometimes we are here with God. Now we are working with God, but we are simply working as his humble servants, and he is the God, the creator, the potter, the musician. We're working with God like an instrument works with the musician. And what I love about Elisha is that he knew this. Like, he does all the dirty work. He did the prep work. But when it came down to it, he's like, all right, chief, your turn. Like, you are going to do something now that I know you can do it, and I know I can't do it. Okay, he steps in, and to end the story, fire comes down. And I believe it swallows up the altar. It swallows up all the water. And God shows up as Elijah had said. Elijah said, it is your power. I can't do what you are about to do, God. I can't, so you need to. But you see, what happens if Elijah didn't have that mindset? What happens if Elijah's like, oh, I got this, right? He's going to be sitting there like Harry Potter, just like kind of throwing a stick at that altar, hoping it lights on fire, right? He's going to kind of be rambling or yelling, and honestly, he's going to look a lot like the people that he was going against. He looks a lot like the prophets of Baal. Out of desperation, it says this. When they were trying to light their altar, the prophets, it says this. They shouted louder, following their normal custom. They cut themselves with knives and swords until the blood gushed out. There really was no other way to do that. Like, you had to do the knives and swords. They raved all afternoon until the time of evening sacrifice. But still there was no sound, no reply, no response from their god, Baal. Ladies and gentlemen, sadly, I think that this is a correct display of us spiritually when we're trying to do things by our own power. Right? Some of us want this miracle, but the problem is that we're not relying on God's power, so we're actually trying to do it all on our own, right? We're all in our energy, and we're not leaning on or relying on God. So by the end of it, we're just sitting there, cut up, exhausted, tired, no farther than we were before, with no response, no reply. We're just sitting there. We have not even tried to rely on God's power. So to understand that we can't, we must also know that we operate out of God's power and not ours. And to wrap up this we can't part, we're going to go to one more classic, and that's in 1 Samuel 17. You know it as David and Goliath. And we're looking at God's strength, not ours. And if you're familiar or if you're not familiar with the story, so he's a little shepherd boy, right? Nothing too astounding about his physical appearance, and he's delivering bread to his soldier brothers who are in the army of Israel. And he's delivering bread, and he stumbles upon, there's this behemoth of a man, Goliath, out in the battlefield, shouting and hurling insults at the Israelite army. See, there was this custom where, if you've ever seen the movie Troy, it's kind of like that opening scene where two armies, an army sends their warrior, you send your best warrior, they fight, right? And they fight, and whoever wins that army is going to kind of be deemed the winner. It's a way to, save time, save lives, that kind of thing. Very thoughtful, right? So they got Goliath, this behemoth, okay? It says that he was possibly around 9.5 feet tall, just a giant man. And he's hurling insults at the Israelites. Ain't nobody coming out. Like, I get it, why they wouldn't. But what's fascinating as I was reading this story is David's kind of immediate reaction to Goliath. It's confusion. He kind of sees what's going on. He's like, we got an army, the Lord's army, dude yelling at him, nothing. He's like, who's this fool, right? That's the Tim Standard version. That's not actually a Bible version. He says, like, who's this guy that's trying to defy the Lord's army? And then why aren't you guys doing anything about it, right? He's confused because David is very understanding of God's strength and God's power. And he's like, why are you letting him say this? So the next 20 verses in this chapter are actually David wrestling with this tension. And this tension is his understanding of God's strength and power and the Israelites' lack of understanding of God's strength and God's power. And he's kind of arguing with the king because he says, hey, I'm going to go fight him. The king's like, all right, well, take our armor, take this. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, me and God, we go way back, right? So I am a shepherd, and a lion tried to attack the flock, and the Lord protected me, and he allowed me, he gave me the strength to defeat this lion. So David's like, I got experience with God. I know for a fact God was with me then. God is going to be with me now. I don't need your armor, with all due respect, king. So he says this, and here's the thing. Here's where the Israelites differed from David. So David was confident. He knew that my God is king, and he's going to deliver me. But to the Israelites, I heard this put in a commentary. It said to them, Goliath's stature was awesome and psychologically overwhelming, right? And I think that this is very representative of fear in our life. It's like, God, I understand you are big and you are mighty and you are strong. But God, if I can be vulnerable for a second, this thing standing in front of me, it is also big, it is mighty, it is strong, and it's a little mean, it's a little scary, right? And so we let that kind of overwhelm us. Scholars say that Goliath's greatest weapon was actually his intimidation. He's 9'6" or so. He's arrogant. He's mean. He's cocky. He actually won the battle in your head before you even went out to fight him, right? It was his intimidation. He won the battle. He defeated you before you guys even got together. The only thing that could conquer this is an understanding that God's strength is going to deliver David to defeat Goliath. That's the only thing, is an understanding, a true understanding of God's strength. But you see, imagine a scene where David is not relying on God's strength, or he's not looking back and relying on the strength of his relationship with God. Like he's got no recollection or understanding of what God has done in his life. So the reason that the Israelites were cowering in their boots is this idea of going toe-to-toe with Goliath with the weapons that he had seemed foolish, right? Like his spear is bigger, his armor is thicker, he's got about 4 feet on us. Going toe-to-toe with Goliath with the tools Goliath had was suicide. And that's our mentality sometimes. Like, I fight fear with more fear. I fight anger with anger. You fight fire with fire. Like, if you go toe-to-toe with Goliath with what he has, you are going to lose. And that is what defeated the Israelites as individuals. Had David, I think, gone toe-to-toe with Goliath with his weapons, it would have been a beatdown, right? It would not have been cool. It would have been like a rated R for violence kind of beatdown. Like, David would have just been all over the place. I think it would not have been good. And I think that can also be a representation in our life sometimes, metaphorically, not literally, but representation when we don't rely on the strength that we get from our relationship with God. Okay, when we just kind of discredit that and we just try to go toe-to-toe with our problems without relying on God, it's going to be a very similar result. Oftentimes, we try and do it ourselves, but we have to get to this I can't part. And these stories are cool. They're empowering because these three individuals, they relied on the God can, and they knew that I can't. Because if not, you got Moses and the Israelites, they're seafood, right? They're goners. Elijah gets knocked out. David I think he just evaporates, right? Those stories end bad, but because God was in those, they are such a big, powerful display of what God can do in our life. I'm reminded of a verse in 2 Peter chapter 1. It says this, by his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. We have received all of this by coming to know him, the one who called us to him by means of his marvelous glory and excellence. And that's the cool part, the strength, right? This comes from knowing Jesus, from trusting and abiding in Jesus. So that's understanding we can't. And now we're going to talk about this idea of living out the God can. I understand it's getting a little warm, it's getting a little stuffy, but we're going to do things a little bit differently, right? We're going to, this living out God can, there's three things I kind of want to put on your brain. You live out God can by having bold faith in God, by trusting God's direction, most importantly, being unashamed of your relationship with God. But there's this family, in our River Valley family. They attend our Redwood campus. They're called the Pelsons. Some of you might have met them. He's an elder here at River Valley. And this family is actually going to, through a video testimony, they are going to show us the power of what God can do in your life. So last year, they received some information that no family is prepared to receive. Their teenage daughter was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer in her arm. And what's wild, and I forget if they talk about this in the video, it was by accident that they actually found that cancer. There was an x-ray. The x-ray was a little wider than it should have been, but right on the edge of that x-ray, there was this cancer. So the radiologist was like, hold up, we need to look at that. And so we are going to look at, it's a pretty long video, just how they knew for a fact they couldn't, and how God was moving in their life. And there's so many powerful things that they say. We're like, we were a mess. We were in pieces, and it was God, and only God, that was holding us together. So we're going to show this video. I do want to encourage you. It's very powerful, especially if you've maybe been impacted by somebody with cancer in your life. This is a very powerful video and very encouraging. So we're going to show that, and then Rachel's going to come back up and lead us in worship.
Hi, church. I'm Anna Grace Pelson, and on February 19th of 2020, I was told that I had osteosarcoma, which is a rare and very aggressive type of bone cancer.
Back in February, we got the news that our then 14-year-old daughter, Anna Grace, was diagnosed with bone cancer, which was quite a blow. Quite a blow. So what do you do with that? Trust is what comes to mind, because, at that moment, you want to think you're in control, but quickly realize you're not.
A friend of mine a long time ago, before I even had kids, told me we are to view life with an open hand, and God can put things in and God can take them out. And this past year was that for us. When your little 14-year-old has that diagnosis, man, it's so rare. If God allowed us to walk through this, we know that He's going to be everywhere in the details.
All we could do is cling to Jesus in this initial diagnosis, and hard to put into words all of the emotions that can flood your mind and do so.
That was pretty hard to hear. And after my oncologist told me that I had cancer, she told me that I was probably gonna end up losing my hair, which as a teenage girl was not something that I wanted to hear. Yeah, so I started what was going to be around 8 months of super intense chemo. My schedule was about 3 or so weeks of hard chemo, and then I had about 3 weeks at home. And so sometimes I felt like Dornbecker Children's Hospital up at Portland was kind of like second home.
It's super hard watching your daughter receive these bags of chemo that the nurses themselves cannot handle if they are not properly gloved and gowned. The chemotherapies that they use for children are so strong. They're stronger than anything that they give adults. The side effects, as she mentioned, were severe. She had huge blisters on her feet. She couldn't walk, and I got to carry her upstairs to the 10th floor on my back. Andrew got to carry her up and down the stairs. Jeff got to carry her up and down the stairs. All of a sudden, we're looking at our 14-year-old who needs a wheelchair, who needs a walker, who needs this kind of equipment that's very foreign for a ballerina and a runner.
You know, carrying Anna Grace up the stairs when she had the big blisters was definitely something I'm not gonna forget. Just because, you know, that's something as a older brother you don't really see yourself doing when your sister's, you know, fast runner and good dancer and strong girl.
So I definitely had a lot of scripture that I just clung to throughout my whole treatment process. One of them being Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I would say that was probably the verse that I would just repeat over and over just when things would get scary or hard. I had my surgery to remove my tumor on May 8th, and the tumor extended from about the top of my shoulder down to just above my elbow, and they took out 9 inches of bone and put in place of that a metal prosthesis. I like to call it my bionic arm. I have a pretty cool scar that I'm pretty proud of. At first, my orthopedic surgeon told me that I would probably only be able to get my arm up to 90 degrees or 120 degrees if I was lucky. And that kind of made me pretty sad just because all the things that I enjoy, such as ballet, doing cartwheels, skiing, some of those things that I really enjoy, I would probably never be able to do. But I kind of put that out the back of my mind just so I could focus on getting through treatment and I could worry about that in the future. So I was doing chemo up until October 4th, and on that day I got to ring the bell signifying that I was all finished with my chemo treatments and that I was completely cancer-free, which is awesome. And yeah, that was one of the best days of my life, probably.
You know, by God's grace, we got to go through this together as a family. Not only our little family, but our church family. We were so covered in prayer by the body, by River Valley, by Christians we don't even know, honestly, praying for us, and that offered some peace. And so thank you all for that.
And so after doing about 3 months of physical therapy, I am now able to get my arm up to 180 degrees. And yeah, I'm able, I went skiing for the first time about a month ago, and I did a cartwheel for the first time. God is just so good. He definitely filled all of my hopes and dreams, and he's just so gracious in the way that he works. He definitely works in mysterious ways sometimes, and it was definitely hard to hear that I had cancer, but I know that in the end It changed me for the better, and as a result, I feel like I am stronger in who I am and stronger in my relationship with him, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
I don't want to paint a picture that's unrealistic, because there were some very scary times, but he's literally holding us together every second of the day, and he's our all-sufficient one. He can handle anything. He's on the throne.
One of the things that we learned and we held on to is the Lord is good. He sits on the throne, and we don't have all the answers. We certainly don't as a family, but what we do know is Jesus reigns. And when life is crazy, when life is out of control, and ours was for a while, you can rest in His Word. It'll get you through. He'll get you through. He got us through.
I keep thinking it's easy to get caught in a place of, if God's good, then, why would He let this happen? But really, if God's good, why does He use, a dirty sinner like me to do His work? And that's just kind of been something that I'm thinking through, and just, so thankful that we have the opportunity to be part of His plan. And what a glorious plan it is.
My name is Anna Grace Pelson, and I am not ashamed of the gospel.